And we are live. Well, welcome everyone to the live Q&A. We're going to be doing a Q&A based primarily on GS1 codes, GTINs, UPCs, and Michelle is joining us. Michelle is from GS1. And Michelle, thank you so much for making the time today and joining us. If you want to give just a brief intro, but I think people are going to really enjoy asking you questions and appreciate you coming on.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me. I am Michelle Covey with GS1 US. I lead our partnerships team, but I also am a strong advocate for letting our community know about GTINs and product identification.
Awesome. And so, Michelle, we're going to start with a couple questions that already came in or that I know will be relevant, and then we're going to jump into the chat questions. So anyone on watching the live now, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box here, and we'll get to those straight after these first few. But Michelle, the first question is, what is a GTIN, and what are the different types of GTINs that a seller might get, or that anyone, starting a product, producing a product, which types of GTINs might they get, and what exactly is that?
Great question. And there are some different terminology used. So let's try to clear it up as much as possible. So a GTIN stands for a global trade item number. It is the unique identifier that is assigned to a product. It's the number string. So some people refer it to as a barcode, but when you look at a product at a retail store, the barcode and underneath it is that string of numbers. It's really the numbers that is associated to that product. That number then gets encoded into the barcode, where then a machine can then read it. So sometimes it gets interchanged for the barcode, but it's really that number string. Now there are different types of GTINs, and it really depends on most likely the region that you're trading your products. So for example, I am in the US. A lot of the retailers use the UPC barcode, which is a 12-digit GTIN. So when members and sellers come to GS1 US, they get a prefix or they get a GTIN from us that is 12 digits long. Most other regions in Europe, other areas of the world, use a 13-digit, which is an EAN, an European article number. They are both equally the same. They are both accepted globally. It's just where they were probably issued. So which GS1 member organization that seller went to, they probably either got the 13-digit or the 12-digit. So you'll hear GTIN, UPC, EAN used kind of barcode, all kind of used together. Hopefully that clarified that for you.
For sure, because people often use the term UPC synonymously with GTIN, as representing all those codes, but that's just the primary, like North American version you're usually going to get with GS1 US. And then another big question people often have is on the cheaper codes. So why should a seller use a GS1 GTIN as opposed to a cheaper barcode from, one of these other websites that sells those? And what are your thoughts on recycled barcodes included there?
Okay. I'm going to tackle the recycled barcodes first.
Okay.
So as far as the standards, the GS1 standards go, industry came together many years ago and put together a GTIN management standard that indicated not to reuse those GTINs in market. So a lot of products can actually live on longer than their original sell date or their in-market date. And so a lot of retailers, and especially the marketplaces, had asked for industry to come together and update that standard to not reuse barcodes or reuse those GTINs. So we don't, as far as the standards, we don't recommend reusing GTINs or using recycled GTINs because they could have been associated to a previous product and sometimes a previous seller. So it just depends on the origin of that GTIN. As far as answering their question about why a GS1 issued GTIN over other sources, what we're seeing in market is a lot of retailers and marketplaces, Amazon, other major marketplaces, they are wanting to make sure that that product identifier is associated to the brand owner, really to protect the brand, to make sure that that brand owner is has rights to their product or has authorized the selling rights for that particular product. And so they could use our GS1 database to check the validity of that prefix or that GTIN to the brand owner. So that's where we're seeing a lot more shift to the recommendation for GS1 issued identifiers, just so that those marketplaces can validate the brand to the prefix owner.
Yeah, it's actually, I've seen it before where a recycled code, if you use that, it will actually bring up a prior product that was listed on Amazon. And then you can't change, for example, the category. Because and it looks really strange because you could have a totally different product in a, completely irrelevant category. So it can create a lot of problems there.
Yeah.
And then Michelle, how much does one GTIN code cost? And is there an annual renewal fee? I know you guys actually made a change to this recently, which has been welcomed by a lot of sellers. But if you could just speak a bit about that for a small new seller, what are their options?
Another great question. We wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for sellers who were just starting out to be able to afford their GTINs. And so we launched last November the opportunity for sellers to come to GS1 US and license a single GTIN for $30. They would get their GTIN. They would have to assign a couple of attributes to it, but they would get their GTIN with no annual renewal fee. And there are no limits to the number of single GTINs that they can license through GS1 US. We do recommend, though, as if you have more than 10, it is more cost effective to go for the prefix option, which is that bundled version where you could get 10, and then there would be an annual renewal fee for that prefix, but it just does become more cost effective. But we do have the $30 GTIN that we've offered, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback because it's making it easier for sellers to launch their products if they only have a couple or a handful.
And you mentioned the company prefix there. If I were to purchase the single code option, and perhaps I did that multiple times, would I also have a company prefix, or are those different in some way? Do those have a company prefix?
Those are different. So the single GTINs, we issue just the single GTIN. So that string is issued on that single basis. A prefix allows, again, it's a bundled option. So it allows a seller to enumerate 10, 100, 1,000. So it's basically more for capacity and larger capacity GTIN assignment. So they are different.
Okay. And then, so how does a seller get a GTIN from you? Which might seem like a simple question, but what's the process? What should someone do say they're brand new to this, they're about to list their first product? How should they get a GTIN from you?
So we've tried to make it as easy as possible. If you are looking to license either a single or a prefix, you could go to gs1us.org. Right off of our homepage, we have the two options right there. I need a single GTIN or I need a prefix, and that will launch you right into basically an e-commerce type of screen that then you would fill out your pertinent information. Most likely things that you are used to when you're buying something online: company information, address, billing address, and then your payment information. And then we issue that GTIN or the prefix. We say in near real time. Sometimes we'll display it on the screen, but then you will get an email within less than a minute with your actual information. And then you could start using start identifying your products with that GTIN, or with that prefix, start enumerating your GTINs right away.
And Michelle, with those details, if I'm running a company, should my company details be on GS1? Or if I'm an individual, a sole proprietor or sole trader, should it be my individual details? And included there, I know a little more advanced, but say I'm starting as a sole trader, like an individual sole proprietor, and then I upgrade later and become a company. What's the process there? So in short, who should own those codes, me or my company? And is that flexible?
So we get this question a lot. When you fill out your application, in the first screen where it does record your company information, it should be how you are branded as an entity, and a selling entity. So if you do have a corporation or even an LLC, that is what you would put into your company name. If you're a sole proprietor and you're selling on your own, then you put in your name, your individual. We don't do any checks to ensure if you have a company or if you're a sole proprietor, but that company name would then be associated to your prefix or your GTIN, to your identifier. That will actually be checked. That is part of some of the checks that these retailers and marketplaces do, is that company name associated to the prefix. Brand name also is very confusing because some people will think that they need to put their brand name there, and that is not the recommendation. So if you have a company but you have a different brand associated to your product, that actually goes into a brand name field. And for the single GTIN at GS1 US, we do ask for that information to be entered onto the e-commerce screen as you're licensing your GTIN. We also have a tool that we offer to our members once they license their identifier. It's called the GS1 Data Hub tool, and they could go in there and manage their brand name associated to their GTIN. But the brand name is, in most cases, is not necessarily the same as the company name.
Okay, so in short, when they're actually signing up there, what should be in the brand name field before we get to
the brand that is, it's the brand that is actually on the package. So I always use the example, Michelle's Cookies LLC, but my brand name might be Crunchy Cookies. So the brand name would be what is actually on the package to identify that brand.
Okay. And when you're talking about inputting that brand name, you're talking about a field in what is called the Data Hub in the US. And for those of you in the UK, that's called your number bank. Yep. So it's actually like a really cool little section, almost like the back end of Seller Central, where you put in your listing details, but in there you're going to put in specific info on your product, and that's going to match very similarly to your product listing on Amazon. And that brings me to my next question, Michelle, which is, so how does this code actually speak to Amazon in this case? What information is actually transferred? What's actually traceable? And why is that important?
So as sellers go to list their product on Amazon, the Amazon platforms, depending on region, selling region, one of the first questions they're asked is their product identifier. So they would have to put in their GTIN, and then they would select which type it is. Now Amazon has it as a GTIN, an EAN, or a UPC. So we talked about the UPC and EAN is a 12-digit or the 13-digit. Their GTIN is also a 14-digit GTIN. So that is adding an extra layer. That is more of an upper level package, like a carton or a case of that item. But that information, once they enter that and associated to their company name, there are proprietary algorithms that Amazon runs to double check that does that identifier match that company name. And then there are other algorithms with brand registry. So that is another whole check to make sure that they're authorized brands, especially if you're a third-party seller. So there are some brand registry checks as well.
Okay, and then we have a couple people in the chat. Hello, Frank, Alex, Maria. Thank you for joining us. And Maria says that she ordered GTINs from GS1 UK, but each time she attempts to create a listing with them, she gets an error message. So Maria, one of the things I have kind of tested with this is sometimes, as Michelle was saying, you're going to select EAN or UPC or GTIN. Sometimes if you actually select GTIN, which remember encompasses all of them, UPCs, EANs, etc. Sometimes if you select GTIN, which is still accurate, that will allow you to, what Amazon will do is auto detect which type of GTIN it is, and that will help you create the listing. So just like a side note, try that and see if it works. But sometimes rather than selecting UPC or EAN, you select GTIN and it will automatically detect which type.
I think some other common things. So if she licensed her GTINs through GS1 UK, most likely it's the EAN. She could try that GTIN option. The other thing too is when Amazon in particular does the checks against the GTIN and the company name, if she licensed her GTIN and then almost immediately went onto the selling platform, the data that comes from the GS1 organizations to go into Amazon's checks usually takes a couple of days. So because their systems are so large. So we do see sometimes sellers when they get to us, they license their identifiers, they are excited, they want to start listing their products same day. They may run into some issues because that information didn't get through their systems so quickly. So it usually takes, we say, 2 to 3 days. So sometimes the seller may have to provide their company prefix certificate to seller support to help with their listing as well. So that's another thing that we sometimes see.
Okay, and if they do need that certificate, how do they get that specifically?
I could speak for the GS1 US organization. So one of the things that we offer when we call them a member joins us, licenses either their GTIN or their prefix, they will get an email to log it with instructions to log into my GS1 US account, and that's where they could go in, see all of their identifiers that they've licensed with us, and then also print their certificates. So we send email instructions on how to access that.
Okay, and then one of the areas of confusion is number of products or variations of products and GTINs. So if a seller has one type of product but has 3 variations, let's say they have a red, blue, and yellow color of the same product, how many GTINs would they need?
We recommend that you have a GTIN for each individual variation. So t-shirts could be a very good example. I have a white t-shirt, but I have a small, medium, and large. You need a GTIN that would identify that small, the medium, and the large. So they're each unique variations. If you then want to sell that same t-shirt in all 3 sizes, in 3 different colors, green and blue, then you would need 3 times 3, you would need 9 GTINs. We have
Perfect.
yeah, and on the GS1 US website, we have a barcode estimator tool that allows somebody to help calculate how many GTINs they may need, and that may lead them to that capacity-based offering versus singles. We also do recommend, as you're growing your business, you might start off with 1, but you may end up, hey, this is doing great. I'll offer it in 3 more colors or 3 more scents or 3 more flavors. So think about how your business will grow, and you can, can figure out how many GTINs or a prefix if you want.
Perfect. And then with selling on Amazon, one of the kind of quirks to it is that some labels have to actually be physically on the product. So when it comes to GTINs specifically, do the GTINs also need to be physically printed and placed onto the products for the majority of Amazon sellers? Or in what cases would they need to be on there? Or, what's the benefit of them being physically on the product?
This is a good question. So you've identified your product with a GTIN, and you've associated it to it. For Amazon, think about that barcode that is associated to their GTIN. So it allows a machine to scan it and consume that GTIN data. Most of that barcode data is used at point of sale. So if you're at the grocery store, at a retail store, it allows a clerk to scan that code and it pulls up all the product information. When you buy something online, you don't have that beep at the checkout stand. So for most products sold on Amazon, you don't need to have that barcode printed onto your package. However, if you are thinking about expanding your business or expanding your business channels into other retail outlets, we do recommend at least planning for putting that GTIN barcode on your packaging, because to repackage your product can be very expensive if you want to grow your business and go into other channels. So it allows you just to plan for future growth. We do recommend putting that barcode associated to the GTIN onto your product.
Awesome. Really well explained on that one, Michelle, because that's one of the most confusing parts is all the different codes and labels.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a bit daunting. And then one of the things that Amazon offers is GTIN exemption. So could you just, speak a bit on that and your thoughts on that, when sellers should actually be using that and when not, and just, the pros and cons, if you're very familiar with that part of their program?
This is definitely an Amazon program, I believe, and they have out on their Seller Central site which categories would be eligible for GTIN exemptions, handmade products, private label products, things like that. One of the things, again, I recommend is think about how you want to grow your business, and if you want to sell in other retail channels. It would be good to get a GTIN and assign it to your product so that you can expand your business or go into other retail channels. I do also believe Amazon is getting more serious to ensure that they can associate that brand to the product using GTIN information, and to ensure there aren't bad actors on the platform, to ensure that there aren't counterfeits, unauthorized resellers. So having that GTIN does help protect your product and your sales. So again, just thinking about your business and what's best for your products, I would take those into consideration before you request a GTIN exemption.
So essentially, if your only place where you're going to be selling the product is Amazon, then it can be an option. But if you're ever going to expand, go to retail, or are concerned about the linking toward your brand, perhaps brand registry, then it's often not the best option. And then, Michelle, related and even more niche, but brand registered sellers on Amazon also have access to a program where Amazon will actually assign that seller GCIDs, which are global catalog identifiers. And they can actually use those to add products to Amazon without GTINs. So it's almost like similar to exemption, but with Amazon issued codes. What are your thoughts on that? Perhaps similar, but if perhaps you have differing thoughts on that program or any insights.
I'm not as familiar, to be honest, with how they use that in lieu of a GTIN. Again, though, we do see that they are fairly firm with their GTIN requirements for those categories that they do request a GTIN for. So again, just educate yourself on which categories need the GTINs and brand registry, and to make that business decision, I would say, for what is best for your company, not just on the Amazon platform, but again, we always see your business grows, how it may how you may need that identifier for other retail channels.
Perfect, Michelle. And those were our primary questions. Some of them actually came through in the chat box here as well. And thank you, everyone who's joining us here. Rakesh, nice to see you. Alex. And Alex, I think we just covered that GTIN exemption. And hello, Kevin, Fred. Fred also says, I bought a GS1 code, but my product was rejected by Amazon. Now I want to use the same code with another product. How can I change the information of the GS1 code so that I relate it to a new product? I think that's a really good question, Michelle, is can that be done? What are your thoughts on this?
Technically, from a GS1 management standard, once that product has been assigned a GTIN and it's entered market, you cannot reuse it. So it should not be associated to a new product. That's how the standard is read.
Okay, and say I did, and I know there are policies, but say I did add a product to Amazon and then I completely deleted it like this, it doesn't exist anymore. And then I went and changed the details in my data hub or number bank. Could that code be used again? Are there policies on that, or how can that cause problems?
It could cause problems because that GTIN is out in market. That GTIN has been loaded into the GS1 databases and can be used and consumed by other sources. So again, I think following the GTIN management rule and not reusing is your best option.
Okay. Well, Fred, at least you can buy one code now, so that should help in that case. And Giselle, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thank you for joining us. And I bought a UPC 12 numbers list with 5 barcodes. Are they still useful since they are recycled barcodes? So, Michelle, so people can use the recycled codes. Like, it is possible to use them. What advice would you give Giselle?
If they are not authorized or not sold through a GS1 member organization, so if they're through other sellers, you run the risk of that GTIN not passing some of the validations against the GS1 database. So we don't partner with other entities to issue GTINs or prefixes. So they only do get issued through GS1 member organizations like GS1 US, GS1 UK, GS1 France. So any other sellers really don't have that relationship with GS1 member organizations, and those barcodes or those GTINs, you do run the risk of them not being validated through the checks that some of the retailers and platforms do against the GS1 company prefix and GTIN database.
And Michelle, Yash asks, what if I have 3 variations of one product, but they're packed in one box? So Yash, I'm going to assume here that you're saying you're selling this as one bundle. So it's 3 variations of a product, but it's one product. It's one listing. It's sold. When a customer buys it, they buy a 3-pack together. In that case, Michelle, how many barcodes would Yash need?
You need a barcode per sellable unit. So if I understand that right, if there's everything, 3 variations into one box, but it's only that one box being sold, then 1 GTIN. But if each of those variations within the box can be taken out and sold separately, then you would need to identify each sellable unit within that box and then the box containing all 3.
I think it's best. If it has its own SKU on Amazon, it needs its own GTIN. I think that's like the simplest way to explain it. And then Rubal just says thank you, and that is awesome, Rubal. Congratulations, that's awesome. Ashim, also my question is, if I am private labeling and thinking to sell only FBA, which is fulfillment by Amazon, do I manage by GTIN or do I need to go for a UPC? So Michelle, I know we did explain the differences between the two, but if you want to explain to Ashim what's best for him.
So again, it goes back to that, is it a UPC or a GTIN? So the GTIN, to recap in case you joined a little late, the GTIN is actually global trade item number, can be synonymous and interchangeable with whether it's a UPC, which is a 12-digit GTIN, generally issued out of the US market, or the EAN, which is a 13-digit GTIN, which is generally issued out of some European GS1 member organizations. So a GTIN and a UPC can be synonymous in this case. So again, recommendation, I think, from private label, Amazon may offer GTIN exemptions on private label. I believe that's one of the categories. It's your business choice if you choose to assign a GTIN or not on those.
Yeah, for sure. And Ashim, with FBA, whether you're doing actually FBA or FBM, you're listing on Amazon. So when you list, you're going to require a code, a product ID. You can do exemption. Personally, I don't do exemption. I prefer to actually have proper trade numbers with GS1. So that's how I do it for every product. But you're going to insert the GTIN you get. If you live in the US, you're probably going to get UPCs from GS1 US. If you live in Europe, you're probably going to get EANs from, for example, GS1 UK. Doesn't really matter which type. You're just going to input that one code, and that's going to enable you to create that listing. And then Rubal says, Dan, can I send via FBA 3 different products in a single box, or do I have to pack them separately? Rubal, the rule always to remember is if you want to send it to Amazon the same way it is shipped out to the customer. So if the customer buys I need better product examples, but if they buy a single t-shirt from you, then that t-shirt needs to be in its own little package. And then of course it can be packed in a big carton with like a whole lot of those t-shirts, but each one is in its own little package. Amazon will not separate or bundle items for you at all. They need to arrive in a way that they can then be shipped out to that customer, whether they're in a little poly bag or little packaging box. So that's the rule there. However, in a shipping plan, you can pack a carton in different ways. The first way is called case packed. And this is when my cartons each hold the exact same type of unit. So all white t-shirts, And then each of those cartons have the same number of white t-shirts in them. So you could have 50 white shirts in 5 boxes. Each one has 50 white shirts. That's a case pack shipment. Or you can do an individual product shipment. And then my carton is going to have all different products in it, and that's okay as well. So that's how you can make your choice. To answer your question, yes, you can do an individual product shipment, but it does take longer to receive by Amazon than a case pack shipment, which is obviously neater and easier for them. And Doctor asks, if GTC 8, then is the FNSKU small? So Doctor, I need more information. Unless, Michelle, you understand GTC 8. I'm
Maybe
not sure.
the GTIN 8. So we do hear that sometimes. So for very small products, think cosmetics. There is a GTIN 8. It's not as commonly used in market because it's meant for very small labels and usually associated to cosmetics. Amazon doesn't have an option in their dropdown for that GTIN 8. You would have to come to a GS1 member organization to get a specific type of prefix to get that GTIN 8. We don't get this question very often, so it's actually kind of good to get. So there is a process through GS1 US to get a GTIN 8. You could assign it to your product. It's not the proper standard. So I'm going to break rule here on the standard, but to be accepted into Amazon, if you do get a GTIN 8, you're supposed to pad it with the first few zeros to get it to a 12-digit when you enter it on Amazon platform. But that GTIN 8 is primarily used in on cosmetics for very small labels.
Okay, and then I also want to add to that your GTIN, your product ID, is very different to an FNSKU. Those are totally different things. Your GTIN, for the most part, is going to be used just to create your product listing on Amazon. It's primarily digital if you're just selling on Amazon. The FNSKU is a bit different. That's for FBA because it goes through the warehouse and gets sent to customers. That's what allows Amazon to track that product and link it to your listing, to your GTIN in a sense, is the FNSKU, which is downloadable from your listing. And then you're going to physically put that one on every individual unit. So again, if we had those 50 t-shirts, each t-shirt will have an FNSKU on it. So those are separate. They're different. Don't get them confused. And you need both if you're doing FBA. And let's see. So ZQ asks, do we need to change the UPC to GTIN for an existing product? No. So Michelle, at the very beginning, and this will be on replay, guys, if you do want to rewatch, but the UPC is just a form of GTIN. So no, you won't. That will be just fine. But if you do have a problem when adding a product, when you're selecting UPC or EAN, try selecting GTIN, and sometimes it will auto select the right one. And Giselle just says, thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And Doctor meant UPC. So yes. So a GTIN 8 would be a very small UPC.
Again, that UPC generally is a GTIN 12.
Okay, because you add all the zeros.
Yeah.
Ashim says, say I am selling a pen and I'm thinking of selling it as sets packaged in a box. So it's a set of 3 and set of 5. In this case, do I need 2 different types of codes to stick on the boxes or only one type of code? So Michelle, if you want to explain the GTIN part of this, and then I will speak to the FNSKU.
So if it's packaged into a sellable unit, so if you have an individual pen and you could sell that and it has an SKU on it, like you'd said, then that gets its own GTIN. If you then package it into 3 and it's together in 3 and it can be sold as 3, then you would put a GTIN on that or identifier on that. If you then sell it in a box and you get 200 in that box and that box of 200 is sellable, you would put a GTIN on that separate. So you don't get, you get the proper quantity when you order. Instead of saying, I want 200, you end up getting 200 boxes of 200. You end up getting the box of 200 pens. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. I can see why people get so confused on it. But just remember, as Michelle's saying here, if it's packaged like that to be sent to the customer like that, so it could be a 1-pack, a 2-pack, a 3-pack, doesn't matter. When the customer buys one product, even if it's a 3-pack, it's one SKU. If your item has its own SKU, it needs its own GTIN. So in your case, Ashim, here, a set of 3 and then a set of 5, that needs 2 GTINs, one for the set of 3 and then one for the set of 5. And then each of those will also have a downloadable FNSKU that you will put physically on the products.
I actually have a really good example of where it was probably not done correctly as a consumer.
Please.
I actually went on to Amazon and ordered 2 packages of coffee. I thought I was going to get 2 bags of coffee. And so I put in 2 because it looked like it was a bag of coffee. And I ended up getting 2 cases of coffee, which was awesome because I got a lot of coffee for very little money. But that seller probably didn't intend that and probably didn't get the dollars that they wanted from it. I got a ton of coffee, but that was a common mistake that we see is they probably meant that was supposed to be for a case versus an individual package of coffee. So
wow,
a lot of so they got coffee for Christmas that year.
So they must have put the FNSKU on the carton.
Yes,
is what they did. They put the FNSKU on the carton, and then the whole carton got sent. Shame. That is a pity.
It was great for me, but
yeah, win some, lose some. But so that's why do not put the FNSKU on your carton. Make sure the FNSKU, remember, is the one that goes on each individual product. And then the GTINs that we're speaking about here, those are for adding your product to Amazon. Mm-hmm. And okay, and then NASA says, do we have to register our product on GS1 website before we go to list the product on Amazon? What do you think, Michelle?
So you are automatically in the GS1 database if you've licensed your identifier through GS1, whether it's a GS1 US member organization or GS1 UK, other organizations. Once you become a member, that prefix or that GTIN information is then automatically shared within the GS1 database. We call it the global registry platform or GS1 registry platform. But that information is automatically shared. So you don't need to do anything separate. It becomes part of your membership within the GS1 member organizations.
Awesome. And then, so this next question is more like Amazon related, but Rubal asks, I want to know if I've done brand registration according to Indian IP laws, will that work globally? So this is a very interesting question because sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So for example, if you have brand registry on an account, let's say in North America, sometimes you can still get those brand registry benefits in the UK. So you are just going to have to see, Rubal, which works. Obviously, if you look at it from a bird's eye view, it shouldn't work because the trademark is registered in the US, not UK. So it shouldn't work. But of course, Amazon is its own beast. Sometimes this does work. So you're just going to need to check if it will work for you across the platforms, Rubal, but sometimes it does. So,
Yeah,
but
I
if
can't
you're,
answer that. That is definitely a brand registry question.
yeah,
And
but
different
test it.
regions have different, regulations. So
Yeah. So just check, Rubal. Sometimes it will work for you. If not, then you'll actually need to get a trademark in that other region and apply then. And Lakmane asks, say I'm choosing FBA instead of FBM. Do you have to label FNSKUs on the units and boxes or GTINs? So this one is a really good question. FNSKUs are only for FBA. So only if you're sending in your inventory to Amazon's warehouse for them to deal with sending it to customers, only then does your unit need an FNSKU on it. In terms of the GTINs, Michelle, if you want to, is that different? So to make sure you know FBM, FBA, FBA is when they send it into the warehouse and then Amazon handles it, and FBMs if you have it at your house. You can still list it on Amazon, but you ship it to the customer if it sells. Would that make a difference to putting the GTINs actually on the products?
I think we answered this a little earlier, but we'll clarify again. So, the GTIN, which ends up then being encoded into a barcode, I guess that's really what most people recognize is when that GTIN gets encoded into a barcode so that it could be scanned at a point of sale. That is usually what's put on a product for retail sale. That goes across the scanner, you hear the beep. If you're doing FBM, shipping it from your home, it doesn't go across that scanner, so you don't need to put that GTIN in this scenario on your product. Again, we always say if you're going to expand your channel and you've designed your packaging and you think you're going to eventually sell into a retail channel that does have that scan, plan for it in your packaging, because repackaging your products can be very expensive.
Perfect.
But it's from my understanding, Amazon does not require it to be on the product if you ship it from your house to the seller or to the buyer, excuse me.
For sure. And Ashim just says, thank you. And thank you, Ashim. Good questions. Yash says, if I'm selling through FBA and the carton itself is a sellable unit, then the FNSKU goes on the carton, right? Yes. Yes. Make sure you don't want to be sending your cartons off to customers if they're not meant to be. And Rubal also just says, thank you. And the same to you, Rubal. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fred also asks, so you can see this is a really popular one. If a UPC is required for listing on Amazon, but do I need to print it on the package as well? So Michelle covered this a good few times, but basically the UPC does not need to be on the package itself for Amazon alone, because it's mainly for scanning at a point of sale, at like a till in a shop. But if you plan on going on scaling up to the point where your product is in retail, then yes, it can be a good idea to include that in the package design from the get-go, because then it's there and ready. But no, it's not needed specifically for Amazon purposes, Fred. And you're welcome, Lakmane. For FBA only, which label is needed to be on the product? The FNSKU. Yes. Does it mean I don't need to get a UPC, or I need a UPC but don't need to put any label on the product other than exactly? So, okay, so if you are only selling on Amazon and you are only selling FBA, you want to put the FNSKU on your product, and that is the only label that needs to be on that product. But you will still want to have a UPC or an EAN, which are known as GTINs. You'll still need one of those to add your product to Amazon.
You've got it. You're a pro, Dan.
And one day asks, hi, can a UPC code bought in the UK be used in the US marketplace? This is a very good question.
It is. We get this a lot. So if you break down the word GTIN, Global Trade Item Number, when you do come to a GS1 member organization and get your GTINs, they are traded globally. So if you do have an EAN, you technically should be able to sell it in the US market. There may be some retailer system limits, but we're educating many retailers around the globe that if it's a global trade item number, regardless if it's an EAN or a UPC, they are globally accepted.
Yes, and I can vouch for that because I actually do EANs and list on the US market, and it's absolutely fine. So they do definitely work globally. And then Rubal and Ashim both thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much for all your info. And that is it. So we will close up. But Michelle, before we do, any last minute advice you have for people on product IDs, GS1, GTINs, or just in general before we close?
Yeah, I know it can be complicated. I think, kind of demystifying what a GTIN is, because it can be used interchangeably with EAN, UPC, barcodes. So we heard that today. So just understanding that, that global trade item number is that unique identifier that you associate to your product. I always advise, think outside of just Amazon if you really do want to grow your business. So that is one thing that we always hear is you get started on Amazon, your product does really well. You want to expand in other channels. So think about that packaging. Do you want to actually print your barcode onto your product? So that's one thing. And then also think for growth. Some people do like that $30 option, which is a great option. But if you do think you're going to expand your product line over time, consider your options on capacity-based prefixes. It can potentially save you money, even though it may seem expensive. Or, you could come back and always get those prefixes later, but just think about where your business may go in 6 months, a year, 2 years. Because even if you license, say, a 10 capacity prefix, and you only have 2 products, you will have that availability to issue the other 8 over time. Those are yours. They will never go away. So you could expand your business that way too. Other things to think about.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I will also be dropping the links below for all of you for GS1 US, GS1 UK, the primary one. So you can just jump to them there if you're concerned you're going to like the wrong site or something. We'll drop it below. But Michelle, thank you so much for joining us and sharing. GS1 is a non-profit. So this is brought to you guys simply for education purposes. And I know a lot of you get quite concerned over this. I hope it has helped and just given you a bit more confidence which labels go where and why GTINs are important. What do they actually do? But Michelle, thank you so much for making the time. And everyone in the audience, if you did enjoy this, drop us a quick like. That'll help us get this out to more sellers who want to learn about it. But thank you very much. Everyone keep well, and we'll see you in the next video.